All right, welcome back. Welcome back, dear audience. I hope you enjoyed the coffee break. And why am I speaking English? You might ask yourself, but that's because our next speaker is an international guest who flew in from America just to join us today. So we're certainly very happy. That's a lie, you had other business, but let's pretend this was the only reason. And we're certainly very happy to welcome on stage Oren Teicher from the American Booksellers Association. Oren, what is your...
Thank you. Thank you.
What is your message to the Swedish book business?
Well, good afternoon. First of all, I should say that I am really delighted to be back in Stockholm. I've had the opportunity of meeting several of you on an earlier trip, and I am really delighted to be here. Of course, I want to express my special thanks to my friend Mats for inviting me again. Some of you know that Mats and his wife Tova have been, for the last several years, been coming to some of our events at the American Booksellers Association, including a trip that they made just recently. Mats probably knows as much about the American book business as I do. He probably could be up here giving these remarks, but I'm really, as I say, thrilled to be here to share with you a little bit about what's going on in the United States and what's going on specifically in the independent bookstore market, which I represent. I'll talk a little bit about the overall U.S. book market, but just to be sure, as you know, my specific expertise is about independent bookstores in the United States. So let me start there and say a word or two. I hope perhaps you have heard there is a pretty remarkable and continued resurgence amongst indie bookstores in the United States. We went through a period of decline in the early 1990s that went through 2004, 2005. We had some difficult days. The competition was fierce, as it always has been, but many stores did close. The good news for us is that trend was reversed about 6 years ago, and gradually each year for the last now 6 years, we've seen a growth and increase in our market. I'll share with you some of the reasons why, and I hope that perhaps some of the trends that we see in the United States will come to Sweden. Certainly the data which was shared with you earlier today about the modest growth in your overall market certainly is reflective of what I hope will be some good news. Certainly in the United States, we've had some modest good news. We've still got a long way to go, and there's still lots of opportunity for continued growth. All of us in the book business, and I think this is probably true internationally, certainly not just true in the United States, we're competing today with every other form of entertainment in a way that we never did before. All of us are walking around with these devices in our pocket that have access to virtually every other kind of entertainment instantly. So I believe, and I think a lot of us certainly in the bookstore part of the American market, believe that the biggest challenge that we have, obviously lots of things within our industry that we've got to try to continue to do and do better, but our largest problem is how are we making reading more compelling, more interesting, because we are competing with everything else. One of the parts of my job, I get to travel a lot, and I have I spend a lot of time on airplanes, mostly in the United States, and I always have a practice. I walk up and down the aisle, and I look and see what people are doing. Now, fortunately, there are a few people still holding books, but most travelers, certainly in the United States now, are traveling either with laptops or with tablets or with smartphones. But when you look at what people are doing on those devices, they're watching movies, they're reading magazines, they're watching TV shows, they're reading newspapers. They're doing a lot of things. Unfortunately, not a lot of them are reading books, but the fact is that all of those other things, let alone playing Angry Birds or every other computer game, is what it is that we in the book business are competing with, and I think represents our biggest challenge as we move forward. So let me tell you a little bit about the independent book market, my association, the American Booksellers Association. We represent privately owned bricks and mortar stores primarily engaged in the sale of new books. Now, that doesn't mean our members don't also operate online, but they also have, for the most part, physical bricks and mortar locations. We say privately owned, meaning that they are not publicly traded companies. Those are the people who are the members of our association. We've seen over the last 5 years about a 20% growth in our membership. And that comes from new stores opening, for sure. It comes from existing stores opening additional locations. And the most significant thing that's happened in our market, which isn't reflected in the growth numbers, as you'll understand in a moment, is that we have literally dozens and dozens of large, prominent U.S. bookstores to stores that are pretty obscure, that no one's ever heard of, that have sold to new owners. The sad fact was a decade ago in our business, when an owner or bookseller got ready to retire, the almost inevitable likelihood was that that store just closed its doors. Today, we are selling stores to new owners, and those new owners bring a whole lot of new energy and enthusiasm. I say this with due respect to all the existing owners. They tend to be a little younger, a little more technologically savvy, and they, in fact, are having a real significant impact on our overall business. Store that Mats and Tova got a chance to visit a few weeks ago in Denver, the Tattered Cover, one of the largest, most well-known U.S. booksellers, is part of that trend, has recently sold to a new owner. So there's new energy in our business, which is absolutely helpful and frankly contagious to everybody else. We've also seen a growth in sales. Now, you saw some overall, the Nielsen data, which showed some modest uptick in the overall American market. Our share of that, frankly, is bigger in terms of gains. We announced at our meeting in Denver a few weeks ago that overall across the network of stores that report to us every week for the creation of our bestseller list that we do through our friends at Nielsen and BookScan, that unit sales across the network of about 600 outlets that report to us every week was up almost 10% in 2015 over 2014. So our sales are strong, and those are book units. That's all we can measure with any degree of reliability, but we've been collecting this data now with BookScan for almost 8 or 9 years, so we think we've got some pretty good statistical background in representing the fact that our sales across the network of our stores has continued to grow. It is true that the overall American book market has, though, come up slightly, has been relatively flat, hasn't grown substantially. The kids piece of our business, though last year it was off slightly, remains a vibrant growth part of the business. We increasingly have the kids departments of general trade stores, as well as a whole group of kids-only bookstores continue to be a really important part of the U.S. market. Certainly part of our success of late has, in fact, it would be disingenuous not to acknowledge, comes from some of the challenges that our chain competitors have had. As many of you, I'm sure, know that Borders, one of the large U.S. book chains, did file for bankruptcy and is now gone. Barnes & Noble, the remaining large national chain, has had significant pressure, and their number of outlets have gone down. I should say, parenthetically, even though I represent independent bookstores, Barnes & Noble is a critically important part of the American market, where we have reason to believe that despite some issues and trouble they've had, they're going to right their ship, and we absolutely hope, and it is really, I think, important for the overall U.S. book market that Barnes & Noble not only survives, but continues to be a viable outlet for stores. You know, one of the things that is certainly true in retail generally, certainly in the United States, because everything changes so quickly, is that it used to be, not all that long ago, the presumption in retail was that the bigger you got, the more efficient and the more profitable you would be. I think what we're learning in a world that is changing as rapidly as it is, that being a little bit smaller is actually a competitive advantage, not a disadvantage, and certainly our members are able to benefit from that. So let me share with you some of the factors that have contributed to this success. I acknowledge that some of these things may be translatable to your market. They all might not be, but I increasingly believe that there's probably more things in common about what it is that has contributed to our success that perhaps can make sense and be adapted here in Sweden. The first overall most significant thing that's happened, which is perhaps not as obvious for European markets, is that in America over the last decade, we've had this explosion of what we call the localism movement. Starting a lot in the farmers market movement, people wanting to buy locally grown products, locally grown food, but the localism movement, people having pride in their community, wanting their community to be different and unique, happens all across the country, in big cities, in suburban communities, in small towns. We have voluminous data now done in over 30 communities across the country in the United States that shows those dollars that get spent locally recirculate in the community. They go further. And literally there are tens of millions of American consumers who absolutely are making a decision about where it is they're buying things, to make that decision to buy in a locally owned independent business because it is a locally owned independent business. We just concluded the 9th annual survey we do with a group of other independent retailers in the United States, and for 9 years in a row we have demonstrated that stores and communities with active local efforts have done better than those stores and communities without. It is absolutely making a difference. So the localism movement, which doesn't just affect bookstores for sure, though a lot of booksellers have been at the forefront of creating that movement across the country, has absolutely revolutionized and turned our market upside down. The second thing that's happened in our country, which certainly I know is applicable across the world, is that the cost of technology has come way down. We, as independent businesses, can access some of the exact same technology that our corporate competitors can. And it's both the kind of technology that a retailer uses at the back end, their POS system, their inventory control systems, their payroll management systems, all the kind of things that the customer never sees, but certainly allow us to operate more profitable, more efficient businesses. And then there's all the ways in which we can communicate with our customers. The use of our websites, the use of social media, the use of email. We have access to those tools almost the same that our competitors do. And those tools really help us operate efficiently. The third thing that's happened in the U.S. market has been that our publishing friends have helped us figure out, how do we reinvent the model? How do we make the model work both for the publisher and for the retailer? You know, there's lots of data that supports the notion, certainly in the United States, that discovery of books takes place and happens in physical locations. So our publisher friends have said, look, we need you to survive as much as we need to survive. And what is the business terms? What is the way in which we do business together? How do we make it more profitable for both? And whether it's on distribution, on co-op, on terms of sale, there are voluminous ways which publishers have helped us reinvent the business model, which certainly has contributed to our success. So you take the localism movement with the use of technology with help from our publishing friends, and you put that together with what has always been true about independent bookstores, is that we are knowledgeable and passionate about the products in which we sell. And you walk into an independent bookshop, our stock and trade, what distinguishes us in the marketplace is the fact that the bookseller on the floor of that store knows about books. And being able to communicate that to customers has certainly always been at the center of our success, but even more so today, because in the United States, as you saw in those Nielsen numbers, the number of titles being published has absolutely exploded. I've been in this business for 25, 28 years now. When I started, you know, we used to publish a fraction of the number of titles now being published. Now, some of those are self-published titles, but a lot are published by lots and lots of publishers, so that we've got a voluminous amount of content out there. So the role of the bookstore as the curator of that content is probably even more important today. So you put all those things together, and not one is even particularly more important than the other, but those factors together combined with what is an incredible entrepreneurial spirit in our world. Booksellers do what they do not because they're getting rich, for sure, but a lot of people are earning a decent living, but they do it because they love what they do. So being creative and innovative and willing to adapt and willing to change, we think is absolutely indispensable to the overall formula. Now, I've talked about some of the upbeat things. It would be disingenuous for me not to indicate we've got some clouds on the horizon as well. There are some challenges that we're dealing with. Certainly the competition from Amazon, if I can use that word, is massive. Amazon's dominance of online selling, their dominance of the ebook business in the United States, which is substantially larger than it is here, their impact on the entire ecosystem of publishing, let alone their impact on the entire ecosystem of the American economy, is massive. We just published a study which attempted to measure Amazon's economic impact on the overall American economy, and we've got some very, very devastating facts about the tax loss, the number of job losses, the amount of empty storefronts that are created by Amazon's presence. So dealing with them as a phenomenon, they are, as I'm sure many of you know, a rarity in the book business, and they are so much bigger by many, many factors of even of the largest publishers. So dealing with that phenomenon certainly represents a challenge for us. The curious thing in better economic times, which obviously is great because it helps consumer confidence, people may shop a little more. The other side of it is that the cost of real estate goes way up. And we are facing significant increases in real estate costs in the United States for a retail bookshop dealing with their occupancy costs. And then we're also dealing with upward pressure on payroll. Lots of communities adopting $15 an hour minimum wage. Many booksellers believe that that's an appropriate public policy, but being able to afford that in a bookstore environment with very, very slim margins is certainly a challenge. So you know, we've got some issues that we're grappling with, but I think overall the good news about the U.S. book market, certainly the independent piece of our market, is strong. And I certainly hope that some of the things that we've done that have been successful can make their way here and can have impact on growing your market. I think that the beginning of increased sales numbers that have been reported here today is a good sign. And we certainly believe that there are lots of opportunities in the world today in the way in which we all communicate, that we can share best practices about what works in our market. We can certainly learn from you and from other countries around the world. There is an extraordinary wealth of book-selling information, knowledge, experience, and in a way in which we can communicate and share that together, I think makes us all potentially more successful and more profitable. So again, I'm delighted to be here to bring you what I hope is some good news, and the hope that some of that good news will make its way here as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Oren Teicher. One of our previous speakers said that US consumers now expect a 70% discount in a clearance. Is that true? Do you have to sell your books at 70% discount?
Absolutely not. Oh. What we're learning is that, at least in our part of the market, price was obviously always is an important driver of consumer behavior, is not the only driver all of the time. Look, sometimes consumers are only shopping price. And frankly, for us, if they're only shopping price, the likelihood is they're going to go somewhere else. But what we're learning is that in a world in which so many of us spend so much time in front of a computer screen or dealing electronically and digitally, there's this yearning for being in a physical place where people are prepared to be less price sensitive about what it is they do. For us, hardback nonfiction, which tends to be some of the more expensive product that exists in our market, is amongst our best sellers. Now, hopefully we're providing a shopping experience that has some value. Our knowledge and passion in putting that right book in the customer's hand is part of why people are paying the premium. But I think my message to you would be that, yes, price matters, but there are lots of other ways which one can deliver value in the book business. And I think if you can be smart in figuring that out, there is absolutely a formula that works without having to sell books at 70% discount. I would tell you that the vast majority of my members sell books at full price. And now there's some discount. You know, everybody in America, there's a part of our economic reality is everybody does what works best for their store. There is no fixed price agreements. There are no great price agreements at all. But most of my members are succeeding in showing that growth that I said by selling books at full price.
All right. Well, thank you again. Thanks so much, Oren Teicher, everybody. And if you can stay for next week, we'll show you the Swedish annual book clearance. How's that for a shopping experience?